My name is Isaiah Holloway, and I've seen 70 winters come and go. I've buried friends, built homes, raised a family, and watched my hands grow rough with the proof of a life spent working for something real. For most of my life, I believed in a simple truth, that if you worked hard, stayed honest, and raised your children right, you earned peace in your old age. I was wrong. I arrived at my son's house on a Thursday afternoon. The sun was sharp and cold, hanging over the neat suburban streets like a watchful eye. Andre's house stood tall and modern at the end of the cul-de-sac, all glass and steel, not a single blade of grass out of place. Even from the curb, it looked less like a home and more like an exhibit. There was something lifeless about the symmetry, the silence that wrapped around it. I remember standing there for a long moment, gripping the handle of my old suitcase, before climbing the spotless stone steps. Brooke was there first. My daughter-in-law looked exactly as I remembered, poised, beautiful, and distant, like a portrait you weren't allowed to touch. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Isaiah," she said, her voice soft and clipped, like she was reading from a script. "You made it." I nodded, trying to hide my awkwardness. "The train was on time," I said. "Traffic wasn't too bad from the station." She sighed, gesturing for me to come in. "Andre's just finishing up a meeting upstairs. He'll be down in a minute." I stepped into the kitchen and it hit me immediately, that eerie cleanliness. It wasn't just tidy, it was clinical. The marble countertops gleamed like they'd never known a meal. The refrigerator stood tall and silver, humming quietly like a machine in a hospital. There wasn't a single family photo in sight. No drawings from grandkids, no birthday cards, no warmth. Just perfect emptiness. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd come to the wrong house. My son grew up in a home that always smelled of sawdust and bread. Annette, my wife, would hum while cooking, the windows fogging up in the winter from the heat of her stew. But this place? It smelled like lemon disinfectant and nothing else. A museum for people who'd forgotten what living felt like. Brooke was arranging something on the counter. A salad, or at least something pretending to be one. A few green leaves, a sprinkle of seeds, a couple of slices of avocado arranged so precisely it felt mathematical. I sat on one of the tall stools by the counter, my old work boots squeaking against the polished floor. I suddenly felt like an intruder. She didn't notice. She was too busy taking pictures of the plate, tilting her phone, adjusting angles. "You have to capture the authenticity of the moment," she murmured. "The authenticity of what?" I asked, half smiling. She didn't look up. "People online crave what's real," she said, completely serious. I wanted to ask her what was real about a $20 salad no one would eat, but I held my tongue. Maybe that was the difference between their world and mine. They chased the appearance of meaning, while I chased the work itself. When Andre finally came downstairs, I almost didn't recognize him. He was wearing one of those tailored shirts that looked like it cost more than my first truck. His hair was slicked back, his smile too bright. "Dad," he said, coming over and giving me a quick hug that felt more like a business handshake. "You look good. How's retirement treating you?" Trembling, at retirement didn't treat anyone well when your wife of 40 years wasn't there to share it. But I just smiled. "It's quiet," I said. "Too quiet sometimes." He laughed, poured 2 glasses of wine, and slid one in front of me. "Try this," he said. "French red, not like that cheap stuff you used to drink." I stared at the glass. "Your mother never liked alcohol in the house," I said softly. "After her father's troubles." Andre waved his hand like it was a silly detail from another era. "Come on, Dad. One sip won't hurt. Times change." "Some things shouldn't," I said, pushing the glass back. He didn't press it, but I saw the flicker of annoyance in his eyes, the same look he gave me when he was a teenager and thought I didn't understand the world. She tried to fill the silence with forced cheer. "So, Dad, why don't you tell Brooke one of your stories? You know, about the old days, how you built the shop from the ground up." I cleared my throat. The memories came back easily. The smell of wet lumber, the sound of hammers in the rain, the laughter of my workers when we pulled through another tough day. It wasn't easy, I began. Back then, we couldn't afford new wood, so I used to salvage scraps from construction sites. Henderson, you remember him, helped me get started. I still remember the night a storm nearly tore the roof off. Annette and I stayed up all night with buckets and tarps, trying to save what we could. Andre interrupted me with a chuckle, waving his hand. What Dad means is that he presented a solid business plan and got an angel investor to believe in his vision. He turned to Brooke and winked. My dad's too humble to tell it the modern way. Max. Voice died in my throat. He wasn't just correcting me. He was rewriting my history, my story. The truth was replaced with something cleaner, flashier, emptier. Brooke smiled politely, like she was listening to a podcast she didn't care about. And in that moment, I felt invisible. That behind, I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. The house was silent except for the soft ticking of a digital clock that glowed blue in the dark. I thought about Annette. I wondered what she'd say if she saw what our son had become. All polish, no roots. She used to say, Isaiah, don't raise a man who forgets where home is. I thought I had listened. Maybe I hadn't. Sentencing. The next morning, Brooke was already dressed when I came down. She was in a workout outfit that probably cost more than my old truck, sipping something green out of a glass bottle. Andre was on his laptop, typing fast, barely glancing up when I entered. Morning, Dad, he said. Big day today. I've got meetings back to back. Tensions for what? I asked, trying to sound casual. Oh, business stuff, he said vaguely. Partnership opportunities. Something in his tone made me uneasy. I didn't press it, but a seed of doubt planted itself deep in my chest. There was a wall between us, invisible but solid. The son I raised was still there somewhere, but buried under ambition, money, and pretense. Crimson. Settlers. Later that afternoon, I stepped out back. The yard was small and perfect, trimmed to the inch. No flowers, no dirt under the fingernails, just uniform grass and sterile beauty. I missed the smell of sawdust, the feel of soil. I missed the sound of life. Pounding to go back inside, I noticed a box half hidden under the patio table. It was old, dusty, out of place in this spotless house. I bent down and pulled it closer. Inside were blueprints, my blueprints, for the original Holloway workshop, my life's work, the same ones I had stored in the attic years ago after retirement. My heart started to pound. What were they doing here? Breathing. Before I could process it, I heard Andre's voice from inside, low and sharp, talking on the phone. Yeah, he was saying. He's here now. No, he doesn't know anything. We'll get the signatures soon. Committing. My chest tightened. The tone, cold, transactional, didn't sound like my son. It sounded like a man making a deal. That night, at dinner, he was all charm again, talking about new business projects, real estate, investments. Brooke nodded and smiled on cue, like a trained actress. When I asked him about the workshop, he brushed it off. Just some restructuring, he said. It's outdated anyway. Time to move forward. Traffic. Him in the eye. That workshop built this family, Andre. Your mother's hands sanded those benches. My sweat is in that floor. He smiled thinly. And now it's time for something new, Dad. The world doesn't need old stories. It needs results. His words landed like a hammer to the chest. I realized then that my son didn't just move on from the past. He'd started erasing it. And the worst part? He thought he was right. Insistence. That night I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the box of blueprints I'd secretly taken from the patio. My fingers traced the pencil marks, the notes in Annette's handwriting. My throat tightened. I didn't know what Andre was planning yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of danger. Not the kind that comes with violence, the quieter kind, the kind that steals your legacy while you're still breathing. And though I didn't want to believe it, deep down I knew. My visit wasn't about reconnecting. It was about removal. I turned off the light and lay back, the silence pressing against my ears. The house around me felt less like a home and more like a trap built from glass. Outside, the night wind whispered against the windows, and somewhere inside me, an old instinct stirred, the same one that had kept me alive through decades of storms and struggles. Something was coming, and I needed to be ready. Morning light slid across the marble like a blade. It was the kind of brightness that exposes every speck of dust, but there was none to be found in Andre's house. Everything gleamed, indifferent and perfect. I sat at the kitchen counter with a mug of black coffee, too bitter, too clean, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the quiet click of Brooke's nails on her phone screen. Andre had already left for a quick meeting downtown. He'd kissed Brooke on the cheek, patted my shoulder, and vanished into a car that looked like it had never seen a drop of rain. The moment the door closed, Brooke sighed and dropped the smile she'd been wearing. Sluggish. "You know how he gets when he's in business mode," she said, though I hadn't asked. "He's impossible until noon." Seizing, I nodded, staring at the steam curling from my mug. There was something uneasy about her tone. Too casual, too practiced. She scrolled, then frowned. "People online are so negative," she muttered. "You try to build something inspirational, and they just tear you apart." Relinqua. I didn't answer. The truth was, I didn't understand her world of filters and hashtags. In mine, a man's worth came from the work of his hands. In hers, it came from strangers' approval. Shia. She finally left for yoga. I wandered through the house. Every step echoed. The walls were decorated with abstract art, gray streaks, empty circles. No photographs of family, no signs of laughter. It felt like a stage set waiting for actors who never arrived. Submissive. I found myself standing in front of the window overlooking the street. My reflection stared back at me, old, worn, out of place. Behind the glass, the world looked warped, like I was peering into a memory that didn't belong to me. Homelessness. That's when I saw the folder on the dining table. Stabilized, thick, black, embossed with silver letters. Holloway Holdings, LLC. Elision. Cessis. The name sent a chill down my spine. I opened it carefully. Inside were documents filled with legal jargon, contract copies, financial statements, all under my name. My hands began to tremble as I read the words, transfer of property rights, shoreline, my workshop, my life's work, Maya. Aaron heard the garage door open. I quickly slid the folder shut and stepped away just as Andre walked in, carrying a small box. His smile was wide, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the table. "Hey, Dad, you look restless. Everything okay?" "It's straight to my legs," I said. He placed the box down and poured himself a drink. "Good, because I've got a surprise for you tonight. Thought I'd take you out. There's this pub near the river, classy place. You'll love it." I didn't trust that smile, but I nodded anyway. Now, the pub was one of those places that tried to look old but wasn't. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, waiters in rolled-up sleeves. The air smelled of citrus and whiskey. Andre guided me to a corner booth, all charm and confidence. "Order anything you want, Dad. My treat." Alex, I told him a burger would do. He laughed like I'd made a joke. "They don't serve burgers here. Try the duck." While we waited, he talked about investments, markets, influence. Words like brand synergy and asset optimization floated around like smoke. I listened, but none of it stuck. He spoke as if money were oxygen and the rest of us were holding our breath. Halfway through the meal, his phone buzzed. He looked at it, frowned, and stood up. "Gotta take this. Back in a sec." He walked toward the restrooms, phone pressed to his ear. I watched him disappear behind the frosted glass door. That's when the bartender leaned in. He couldn't have been more than 25. His hands shook as he wiped a glass. "Sir," he whispered, eyes darting to the hallway Andre had gone through. "Your son's not on a call." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Shuffled the host as he needed to meet someone out back. "He's been doing that the past few weeks, always meeting the same guys." My stomach turned. "Who?" He hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes. "One of them's a real estate developer. The other, lawyer, I think. They talk about your name, sir. About signatures. I shouldn't be telling you this. My pulse pounded in my ears. Thank you, I whispered. You've done the right thing. He swallowed and nodded quickly, moving away. For a long moment I sat frozen. Then instinct, the old carpenter's instinct that told me when a beam was about to crack, kicked in. I excused myself, found the restroom, and stared at my reflection. The face looking back at me was pale, lined with disbelief. I opened the small window above the sink. It was a tight fit, but desperation gives strength to old bones. The metal scraped my shoulders as I climbed through, landing awkwardly in a narrow alley behind the pub. My knees screamed in protest. The night air was cold, heavy with rain. I crouched behind a trash bin and listened. Muffled voices drifted from the other end of the alley. Andre's voice, calm, businesslike, spoke first. Once he signs, we can file everything. The deed's clean. The workshop property alone will cover most of the investment. Another voice, older, raspier. And he doesn't, no? Ramifications, Andre laughed. He thinks it's paperwork for taxes. The old man's clueless. Sentimental, but clueless. My chest constricted. I wanted to shout, to confront him right there, but my legs wouldn't move. Hamilton says, "We'll need him to sign by Monday. Developers don't wait." Andre replied, "He'll sign. Trust me. He still thinks I'm his good boy." Their laughter cut through me like a saw blade. I pressed my hand to the wall, feeling the cold seep into my palm. My son, the boy who once built birdhouses beside me, who used to fall asleep in sawdust piles, was selling me out. I waited until they left, the sound of their shoes fading into the street. Then I stood slowly, every joint aching, and walked the long way back to the main road. Under the streetlights, the world looked unreal. Cars hissed by. People laughed on patios. Life went on while mine cracked silently in the shadows. Uphold a taxi and gave the driver Andre's address, but halfway there I changed my mind. "Take me to the old workshop," I said. The workshop sat at the edge of town, behind a line of maple trees. It had been months since I'd last stepped foot there. The sign, Holloway Woodworks, was faded, the paint peeling, but it still smelled the same: sawdust, oil, memory. Inside, dust motes floated in the thin light from the window. Half the shelves were empty. Tools I'd collected for decades were gone. Machines missing. It looked stripped. A voice behind me said, "Isaiah?" I turned. Henderson stood in the doorway, my oldest friend, older even than I remembered. His clothes were stained with varnish, his face creased with worry. "I thought that was you," he said. "I've been meaning to call." He hesitated, then added, "Andre's been around. Said you gave him permission to sell some of the equipment." I felt the room tilt. "He what?" Sighed. I didn't believe him, but he had papers, signatures with your name. I told him it didn't feel right, but he said you were simplifying things, liquidating assets. I gripped the edge of the workbench to steady myself. "He forged them." "I figured as much," Henderson said quietly. "He's in deep with some big money people. They're talking about turning this place into a condo complex." For a long moment I couldn't speak. The workshop had survived fires, storms, recessions, but not this. "I'm sorry, Isaiah," Henderson said. I tried to stop him. I looked around at the walls, the marks where Annette and I had measured boards, the initials carved into the beam where Andre had written his name at 10 years old. Each scar told a story, and my son was trying to erase them all. I stayed there until the sky began to lighten. Dust clung to my coat, and the ache in my back reminded me I wasn't young anymore. But inside, something else stirred, a cold, hard resolve. Hadn't felt in years. By the time I returned to Andre's house, dawn had broken. He was asleep upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. I needed to think, not as a father, but as a man who'd built something worth defending. If made a list, names, dates, assets, every detail I could recall about the business. Then I pulled out my phone and called Mr. Clayton, my old attorney. He'd handled the incorporation of Holloway Woodworks decades ago. When he answered, his was rough with sleep. "Isaiah, it's been a long time. I need your help," I said. "It's about Andre." By the time we finished speaking, the sun was up. Clayton promised to review everything, to verify signatures, to prepare for the worst. I exhaled and looked around the pristine kitchen. Brooke's artfully arranged fruit bowl gleamed on the counter, perfect and fake. I thought about the bartender's frightened eyes, Henderson's guilt, Andre's laughter in the alley, and I realized something simple and terrible. My son had learned all the wrong lessons from me. He'd learned persistence without conscience, ambition without heart. I walked to the window and stared out at the manicured lawn. My reflection looked back at me, older, angrier, but alive. For the first time in years, I didn't feel weak. I felt purpose. Andre thought I was a relic, a man too soft to fight back. He'd forgotten who built the beams he was standing on. That night, as I lay awake, the silence of the house pressed in around me. Somewhere down the hall, Andre's phone buzzed again and again, messages lighting up the dark. Deals, deadlines, betrayal in digital form. I closed my eyes and whispered to the ceiling, "Annette, give me strength," because the next move would be mine. The morning after my alleyway discovery, I woke with a weight pressing down on my chest, heavy enough to make me almost forget how to breathe. The house was quiet, too quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Andre had left early, probably to finalize something he thought I would never uncover. Brooke was nowhere in sight, likely off photographing some staged breakfast that would never be eaten. I sat at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee, letting its bitter warmth seep through my body, and I stared at the folder I had tucked under my coat the night before. It wasn't just any folder. Inside were copies of legal documents that Andre had somehow managed to forge, or at least manipulate, using my name. Deeds, contracts, powers of attorney, all pointing to one horrifying conclusion. My son was systematically selling off the workshop and other assets I had spent my life building. I set the folder down and ran my fingers over the edges of the table. It was smooth, sterile, nothing like the rough wood of the bench I had built with my own hands decades ago. I remembered the night Annette and I had installed that first workbench, the splinters in our fingers, the smell of varnish, the satisfaction of creating something real. And now, all of that was in jeopardy because my own blood had forgotten its roots. I needed answers. I needed proof. And I needed it before he had a chance to finalize whatever deal he had in motion. I called Henderson, my old friend and business partner, the one man who knew the workshop as intimately as I did. "Henderson," I said when he answered, keeping my voice low, "I need you to come down to the workshop. Now." There was a pause. "Isaiah, it's early. You okay?" "Not really," I said. "Bring everything you have on the equipment, the accounts, anything Andre might have touched. I need the truth, Henderson. All of it." An hour later, he pulled up in his old truck, the one that still had paint chips and dents from decades of hard work. We walked through the back gate, and the workshop came into view. Seeing it from a distance hurt more than I expected. The roofline was still solid, but the windows were dusty, the yard overgrown with weeds I had never allowed in my lifetime. The destruction was worse. Shelves were stripped of tools, machines were gone, and the floor was bare in places where once we had stored years of timber. Henderson followed my gaze, his face grim. "He's been at this for months," he said quietly. "Andre's been calling it modernization, but it's just selling off pieces of the soul of this place." I ran my hands over the worn bench near the window, the one where I had taught Andre to plane wood when he was a boy. Memories flooded in. The smell of sawdust on his small hands, the grin on his face when he successfully cut his first dovetail joint, Annette laughing in the background. Those moments were gone now, replaced by spreadsheets and contracts and lawyers. We went through the paperwork Henderson had brought, receipts, invoices, loan agreements. Every line seemed to confirm my worst fears. Andre had been quietly signing off on sales, claiming it was all part of a restructuring plan. The money from these sales had been moved into offshore accounts, tied to entities I had never heard of. He had made me look like the absentee, out-of-touch patriarch, while quietly liquidating the family's legacy. My hands shook as I flipped through the final documents. Copies of a deed transferring the workshop property to a development company. The signature at the bottom was unmistakably mine, or at least it looked like mine. Forged, Henderson said. There's no other way. He didn't have my consent. He didn't have yours, yet somehow. He shook his head. He's good at this. Too good. Feel a hollow ache in my chest. Andre wasn't just selling property. He was erasing the work of my entire life, the foundation that had supported our family for decades. And worse, he thought I wouldn't notice. Spent the afternoon retracing every transaction Andre had made. Every phone call, every meeting, every signature had been calculated. It wasn't just greed, it was strategy, deception, and betrayal wrapped into one. I realized then that I couldn't confront him directly yet. He had the documents, the lawyer, the developer, all of them lined up to finish this deal. If I made a misstep, I would lose everything permanently. Pennsylvania, and I began planning. First, I needed proof. If Andre had forged my signature, there had to be a trail. I called my attorney, Mr. Clayton, and explained the situation carefully, without revealing every detail. Clayton promised to dig into the signatures, verify documents, and prepare a legal path to block any unauthorized transfer of property. Plus, semantics. I returned to the workshop. Dust covered the machines like a fine gray blanket. I ran my hands over the tools we had used for decades. Each one told a story. The plane I had sharpened myself, the saw that had cut more planks than I could count, the clamps that held together more than just wood. They had held together the dreams of a family. I knew that if I didn't act, Andre would destroy these memories, reduce them to collateral in a game of money and appearances, championship. Henderson helped me make a detailed inventory of what remained, photographing and documenting everything. Every tool, every piece of timber, every corner of the shop would be accounted for. Overthrow. That night, I returned to Andre's house under the guise of casual conversation. I had to appear unaware, ordinary, trusting, a man who had no idea his world was crumbling. Brooke was setting up another photo shoot, adjusting light angles over a bowl of fruit. Andre greeted me with a practiced smile. "Disregammon, want to see the house plans for the new apartment?" he asked. "I've been thinking about converting part of the garage." I nodded slowly. "Sure," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He showed me the blueprints on his tablet. He's struggling with a partly of discussion for Mother. He showed me, that's really not. The world of the legal path and publicly not enjoy that the two will still was lookingly. I nodded slowly. He said prints on his tablet. I listened, nodded, asked the occasional question. But inside my mind raced. Every line of those plans was a threat. Every measurement, a step toward erasing the workshop. I could feel my blood boiling, but I kept my face calm. Anger would tip him off. The days passed. Andre continued his routine, meetings, phone calls, backhanded compliments, all while pretending that nothing was wrong. But I was learning him, observing him, calculating the right moment to strike. Henderson visited frequently, bringing more records, more proof. One afternoon, he handed me an envelope marked confidential. Inside were contracts Andre had signed with developers using fake powers of attorney. He had even begun negotiations to sell part of the property outright. "This is worse than I thought," Henderson said. "He's crossed a line. You can stop him, Isaiah, but you have to move fast." Unresolved, I nodded silently. "I will, but it has to be precise. He thinks I'm oblivious. That's my advantage. Leukemia." We spent the evening going over a strategy. I would not confront Andre directly. I would not sign anything he presented. Instead, we would prepare a legal shield, document everything, and wait for him to make a mistake. Every signature, every transfer, every meeting would be traced. By the time he realized what was happening, it would be too late. I returned to my small bedroom that night, exhausted but focused. I thought about Annette, about the life we had built together. I remembered her saying, "Isaiah, a man must protect what he loves, even when the world turns against him." That was the lesson I would follow now. Outside, the street was quiet. The night carried a chill, the kind that seeps into your bones and refuses to leave. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the workshop, about the betrayal, about the long fight ahead. Andre had made his move, but he hadn't counted on me. He hadn't considered the stubbornness of a man who had built more than just a house or a workshop. He had built a legacy, and I would fight to keep it. Because this wasn't just about property, challenges. It was about dignity. It was about justice. It was about proving that no one, not even a son, could erase a lifetime of work without consequence. The days after uncovering Andre's plans felt like walking through fog. Every movement, every word, every gesture had to be measured. I was a man in a house full of strangers disguised as my own family. Andre walked around as if he owned not just the house, but the very air in it. And Brooke moved like a ghost, documenting a life she had already decided was superficial. But I had a secret, and with secrets come patience. First step was to appear ordinary. I returned to my old habits, slow breakfasts, long afternoons reading newspapers, quiet evenings with Henderson on the phone, reviewing documents, analyzing each of Andre's moves. I did not confront him. I did not challenge him. I smiled, nodded, and acted like the harmless 70-year-old father who had no idea his empire was being dismantled. Andre thrived on underestimating me, and I let him. We came bounding into the kitchen, excited about a meeting with a potential investor. He carried a folder identical to the one I had found in the pub alley. "Dad," he said, flashing that practiced smile, "I've got some documents I need you to sign. Nothing complicated, just formalities." Acting at him and nodded. "Sure, let me see them." Andre the folder over, his confidence radiating like heat. But I didn't take it from him. I let it hover between us. My gaze swept over him, slow, deliberate. "You know," I said, voice calm, "I've been thinking about the workshop." Andre froze for the fraction of a second it took me to know that my words had landed. "Yes," he said cautiously. "The tools, the machines, the floors. Everything I built over 50 years. You can't just sell that, not without understanding it." Restrained, he chuckled. "Dad, it's just business. You've retired. The world moves on." I didn't respond. I simply watched him, letting the silence stretch. In that pause, I could see the first flicker of doubt cross his eyes. He hadn't expected me to notice. He hadn't expected me to care. Eyes shielding. I spent the next few days in the workshop, documenting every missing tool, every displaced machine, every stripped shelf. Henderson helped, bringing files, invoices, even old photographs of the workshop in its prime. Every detail was important. Every piece of evidence could be used later. One afternoon, as I adjusted the angle of a photograph showing a set of chisels that Andre had sold, Henderson cleared his throat. "Isaiah," he said, "we need to be careful. Andre's not just careless, he's strategic. One wrong move and he'll have everything locked up legally before we can act." "I know," I said, "which is why I'm not acting yet. We wait. We let him move forward. We watch him expose himself." Henderson nodded, though I could see the tension in his eyes. He had always known Andre as a kid, as the boy who once carried too many pieces of wood for his own good. The man he'd become now, ruthless and calculating, was almost unrecognizable. Trembling. That evening, back at Andre's house, I played my role perfectly. I complimented the decor, asked polite questions about investments I didn't understand, and laughed at jokes that weren't funny. Brooke was already setting up her phone for a live stream or some photo shoot, another meaningless performance, and I ignored it, letting the emptiness of the house wash over me. Andre was preparing to leave for another meeting when he stopped and turned toward me. "Dad, one day, all this will be yours," he said, tapping his tablet filled with financial projections. "The company, the house, the workshop, windshield." I smiled. "I know," I said quietly. "That's why I need to make sure it's protected. For everyone who depends on it, not just for you." To say. His confidence wavered for the first time in days. He left quickly, the click of the front door echoing in the silent hallway. Possessing. Later that night, I began preparing the legal groundwork. I contacted Mr. Clayton, my attorney, and laid out everything we had discovered. Forged signatures, unauthorized transfers, offshore accounts, and Andre's meeting history. Clayton promised to begin preparing injunctions to freeze any sales or transfers, but he warned me. Andre had powerful allies, and he wouldn't hesitate to challenge everything legally. That wasn't a problem. I wasn't relying solely on the law. I was relying on something Andre had forgotten: patience and the knowledge of the workshop itself. I returned to the workshop with Henderson. The old machines creaked under my touch. The floors smelled of sawdust and oil, and the walls held memories of my wife, my children, and the life we had built. I began marking each machine, each tool, each piece of wood, photographing and recording everything meticulously. "This," I said to Henderson, gesturing to the main lathe, "is our leverage. He thinks we're powerless, but he doesn't know these details. He doesn't know what he's really dealing with." Henderson nodded solemnly. "I've never seen you like this, Isaiah. Focused, calm, dangerous." "Good," I said. "That's exactly what he needs to see." The next week, I made subtle moves to lure Andre into revealing his full plan. I asked innocent questions about upcoming sales. I complimented his business acumen, all the while pretending to be unaware of the destruction he was causing. Every time he spoke about a deal or a transfer, I mentally logged the details. Every word, every hesitation, every overconfidence. I cataloged it all. Andres never suspected. He thought I was old, slow, sentimental, and easy to manipulate, and that was my advantage. Then came the evening that marked the turning point. Andre had invited the developer and lawyer to a private dinner at the house to finalize a major sale. They arrived, impeccably dressed, all smiles and handshakes, unaware that I had been listening, observing, and recording every interaction. Disproportionately, I didn't confront them. I didn't make a scene. I simply let them underestimate me. Every word they said, every contract they passed, every signature they sought, I noted it, photographed it, memorized it. By the end of the night, I had enough evidence to not only stop the sale, but expose Andre's manipulation to the authorities, the bank, and anyone else involved. Returning to my bedroom that night, I felt the cold thrill of purpose. I had waited, watched, and gathered the truth. Andre thought he was untouchable, but he had revealed himself completely. His arrogance, his greed, his belief that I was a relic, all of it worked in my favor. I thought about Annette as I lay in the dark. Her voice echoed in my memory. "Isaiah, never underestimate a man who knows the value of what he's built." She had taught me patience, strategy, and the strength of silent resolve. I was putting those lessons into practice now. Outside, the wind rattled against the windows, whispering through the empty house. Somewhere, in the distance, a clock ticked. Time was on my side, and I intended to use every second. Andre had made his moves, but the game was far from over. And when the moment came, I would strike with precision. Because this wasn't just about money, or property, or even pride. Imprison, at about reclaiming what was mine. Impartial, at showing my son that legacy isn't inherited, It's earned, protected, and respected. And Andre, the man who had forgotten his roots, would finally understand that lesson. The sun had barely risen when I woke, the kind of early light that made the walls of Andre's house glint in a sterile, indifferent way. Everything seemed the same: the marble counters, the polished floors, the absence of color, absence of warmth. But inside me, nothing was the same. I had spent days preparing, observing, gathering proof, and now the final moment was at hand. Andre was downstairs, already pacing like a general awaiting orders, the phone in his hand, the air around him thick with the arrogance of a man who believed he was untouchable. Brooke was still in her staged routines, capturing yet another morning aesthetic for her followers. I took a deep breath, grounding myself. Every step I took had to be careful. Every word had to be measured. One misstep and Andre could ruin everything. But I had patience. I had the truth. I had history on my side. Shields. The first move was subtle. I asked Andre to show me the final version of the contracts he had prepared for the developers. He handed them over eagerly, confident that I would sign without question. I pretended to review them slowly, flipping through pages and murmuring idle observations. "You've done a good job organizing everything," I said finally. "I just have a few questions." Trembling over my shoulder, smiling. "Of course, Dad, anything." I asked about dates, about signatures, about transactions that seemed out of place. His eyes flickered briefly to the clock as if he had somewhere else to be, then back to me. I pressed further, feigning confusion. "Andre, these signatures, they don't look like mine. Are you sure I signed these?" He laughed nervously. "Dad, come on. I wouldn't forge your signature. That's illegal." I tilted my head, studying him. "Really?" "Because some of these documents are notarized in ways that I never approved. I'm sure the notary would be interested to know the truth." For a moment, he faltered. His practiced charm wavered. The confidence he relied on so heavily began to crumble. While Andre was distracted, I discreetly took photographs of each page, every signature, every irregularity. My phone recorded video of him as he explained details to me, unaware that every word could be used in court, in arbitration, and in any legal challenge to stop his plans. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. He thought he was smarter than me, but arrogance is a poor shield against careful observation. By mid-morning, I had what I needed. Enough evidence to freeze the sales, challenge the transfers, and prove that Andre's actions were deliberate. I called Mr. Clayton, who promised to come immediately and file the necessary injunctions. Henderson arrived shortly after, carrying additional documents and backup proof. Together, we went through every invoice, every bank statement, every contract. By noon, we had created a mountain of evidence that was impossible to ignore. Every forged signature, every suspicious transaction, every misleading claim was documented and time-stamped. I leaned back, exhausted but alive. The fight was not yet over, but the tide was turning. Andre had moved first, but I was reclaiming the battlefield, one careful, deliberate step at a time. That evening, Andre returned with the developers and lawyers for a dinner meant to finalize the biggest sale yet. The table was set perfectly, glasses gleaming, silverware arranged like a scene from a magazine. Brooke floated around, adjusting angles, snapping photos, smiling without joy. Andre was charming, confident, oblivious. He had no idea that I had prepared every word, every piece of evidence, every detail of our plan. I played my role flawlessly. I complimented the food, asked questions about the contracts, nodded politely at the developers, and all the while, I waited. Homeland, thanks. As dessert was being served, I leaned forward and spoke quietly. "Andre, I need to see your accounts, the complete records for every transaction over the last year." The room froze. Brooke's phone hovered mid-air. The developers exchanged glances. Andre's smile faltered, a tiny crack in the armor. "Misinformation. I, what for?" he asked. "To ensure everything has been done correctly," I said, "because any errors could be costly, for everyone involved." Andre stammered, trying to regain control. He started explaining, justifying, arguing, but I held up my hand, calm and steady, impartial. "I've already reviewed everything," I said quietly, "with Henderson and my attorney. There are discrepancies, Andre. Documents notarized without my knowledge. Transfers I never authorized. Signatures I never made." The developers leaned in. The lawyers shifted in their seats. Andre's composure began to crack. You don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "I was trying to. It was all for the family." I smiled, not the smile of joy, but the smile of inevitability. The family? The family is built on trust, Andre, on honesty, on legacy. What you've done isn't helping. It's destroying. Henderson stepped forward, presenting the folder of evidence. Each photograph, each statement, each irregularity laid bare for the room to see. Andre's eyes widened. He had believed he was untouchable, but now the truth was impossible to ignore. I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in years. Vindication. Not cruel, not petty, but precise and just. Every action I had taken, every careful observation, every calculated step had led to this moment. The developers were silent. They didn't want a legal mess, and I could see them calculating their own risks. The lawyers were already pulling out phones, preparing to document the discrepancies for potential litigation. Andre's confidence, his charm, the empire of deceit he thought he had built, it was crumbling. He began, but his words faltered under the weight of the evidence, my old bones creaking, every scar on my hands a testament to the life I had built. "Andre," I said, voice steady, "you've underestimated the man who built this family. You've forgotten the lessons of patience, integrity, and hard work. And now, you will see that legacy isn't inherited. It's protected." Andre slumped into his chair, defeated, realizing that charm and manipulation would not undo the truth. Brooke, still holding her phone, looked between us, her stage smile faltering. Henderson and I shared a brief glance. Justice was unfolding, not with violence, not with anger, but with truth and persistence. By the end of the night, the developers agreed to halt all sales until proper legal review could occur. The lawyers confirmed that the forged documents would be invalidated. Andre was forced to retract, to explain, to face consequences for his deception. Improperly. I watched him sit there, pale and broken, and a strange calm washed over me. I had not wanted to humiliate him. I had wanted to protect what was mine. But the lesson was unavoidable. Betrayal has consequences, even for a son. Later, as the house grew quiet and Brooke finally put her phone down, I walked through the rooms. Everything gleamed, but now it felt smaller, less threatening. I returned to the workshop later that evening, the smell of sawdust and oil greeting me like an old friend. Henderson and I walked through the machines, the benches, the walls marked with decades of history. "This place," Henderson said quietly, "it's more than just wood and tools. It's a life. Ancients," I nodded. "And it always will be. No one can take that from me. Not Andre, not the world." Sluggish, I sat on the main bench, running my fingers over the worn wood, remembering Annette, remembering the first day we opened the workshop, remembering the boy Andre had once been. A lifetime of memories, sweat, love, and perseverance, all still here, intact. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe fully. The battle had been won, but the lesson remained clear. Legacy is fragile and must be defended fiercely. 861. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, carrying with it a promise of new beginnings. I knew Andre would learn, in his own time, that honesty and hard work could never be replaced by deception. And I knew, in my bones, that I had honored the life Annette and I had built together. A home. A courting rose from the bench, old hands steady and sure. The workshop was safe, the family's history intact, and the knowledge of what I had protected would carry on, long after the echoes of betrayal had faded. Emantics. And as I stepped outside into the cool night, I felt the weight of 70 years settle comfortably on my shoulders. I had fought, I had survived, and I had won.